Well, welcome, ladies. It's so good to have you come here tonight. We're very excited for this evening's talk on raising a Catholic family by design. We understand there was a lot of interest, and although not everybody could come, so we are grateful that this talk is being recorded, so it will be watched and heard, other than here just tonight. It is my pleasure. I should introduce myself. My name is Margaret Moyna. I serve on the TCCW board. And it is my pleasure to introduce tonight James and Jessica Chastik. They are one of our own parishioners here at Transfiguration, along with their 6 children. And we are delighted to have them talk. And I welcome you. Let's all give them a warm welcome.
Hello. Thanks for having us. So James and I have been married for about 15 years now, just over 15 years, and when we started talking about doing this talk, we decided that I would do a talk and he would do a talk. So you get 2 talks tonight for the price of 1. So I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I will not be having a 10-step plan on how to raise a perfect Catholic family. And I won't be going through a litany of the mom blogs for all the things that you should be doing to make sure that you have a perfect Catholic family, because that makes me dizzy. So sorry. And in my experience, there's no such thing as one perfect model for Catholic family life. And there's no such thing as a perfect Catholic family. So let's just get that on the table. So we all have our imperfections, and I've witnessed so many beautiful Catholic families that are living out their faith in really diverse ways, and that's part of the beauty of God's generosity. But there are certain things that all of these beautiful families have in common, so I thought I would speak to some of those commonalities and also share a few practices that our family has adopted with some success. So I'm going to talk about how our Catholic family lives should be intentional and how they should be marked by joy and gratitude. So let's talk intentional. I think many of us would tend to go through life by default, just letting things happen, and we let our lives get filled with demands on our time from kids' activities or volunteer commitments or work commitments, and we find ourselves allowing our lives to be defined by the demands on our times and talents rather than directing our time and talents towards a definite goal. And this can start at a really early age. Maybe we picked a high school with a view to college, and we picked a college with a view to a job, and we picked a job or a career with a view to doing what we think is going to make us successful or make us wealthy or whatever, right? But or maybe we did it because that's what our family thought that we should do, or it's what our family does. But because we're human and Catholic, we know that our ultimate goal is heaven. And I don't mean that in some far-off abstract sense. I mean that it should be our first goal. It should be our priority every day and our defining goal. And we should be at least as focused on getting ourselves and our spouse and our kids to heaven as we are about getting them into professional organizations or the U or an elite soccer club or whatever. And this means pursuing heaven through the everyday mundane activities of our lives. So the question that should be constantly present and in the forefront becomes, how do I get to heaven? How do I organize my life to help me and my family and as many other people as I can get to heaven? If we start with these questions and we use these questions to anchor our lives will start to look different than many of the people around us, and our lives will become transformed and become transformative. Like any other aspect in our life, success, getting to heaven, will not happen by accident. It'll be the result of choices made and pursued each and every day. There's a powerful sentiment in our modern culture that Catholicism is basically a list of thou shalt nots, and that it's maybe living a Catholic life is severe or bland or stern, that it's not fun to be Catholic. And I think that's crazy town. I think that living an authentically Catholic life means living out a love story, complete with joy and sorrow and suffering and celebrations, and we have to have the courage to live that boldly. And I can promise you that the reason I am still a practicing Catholic is that at an early age, I encountered Catholics who were authentically and palpably joy-filled humans. Before I even understood why they were so happy, I just knew that they were happy. It was just evident in their lives. And I wanted the joy that they seemed to be living. Spoiler alert, it turns out that joy is a result of a Christ-centered life. But joy is very attractive. It's really attractive to people. It is perhaps the most powerful evangelization tool that we have. I mean, outside of the Eucharist, right? But living a life of joy is very attractive to people. And one of the enduring lessons of my high school chaplain's life was that if you are not a joyful Catholic, you're doing it wrong. So this joy does not mean that there are not real and profound struggles and suffering. Rather, it means that even in the midst of real suffering and real struggles, if you have a relationship with Christ, an intimate relationship with him, that there is peace and there is mercy and there is joy. But we have to be looking for it. We have to seek it out because sometimes it's hard for us to see. And part of seeking joy is that we have to intentionally practice gratitude. I remember when we experienced a miscarriage early in our marriage, we were sitting in the doctor's office and he had given me a prescription for antibiotics and pain medication for healing after that miscarriage. And then he took out his prescription pad and he wrote out prescriptions for spiritual healing after miscarriage. And one of his recommendations was, it's okay to be angry, but remember to be grateful. And I thought, I should be grateful that my baby died? But then I realized it wasn't that we needed to be grateful that our baby died, but we had to be grateful that we had had that baby even for a short time, that it had still been a great gift to us, and that now we have this saint in heaven waiting for us. That was the first time that I had encountered the idea of intentionally practicing gratitude, especially in a hard or dark time. So we didn't have to be grateful for the pain that we were experiencing, but I will tell you that in experiencing that pain, it made me a much more empathetic human. So there was even grace in that pain and in that suffering. So those are sort of my broad overarching principles. Live life intentionally towards heaven, seek and live joy, and practice gratitude. But what does that look like in the midst of a Catholic family? And some of what I have to say is, we have these 6 kids and they're from 4 to 10. So some of my practical comments reflect that, but I think that they're broadly applicable to all of us. So as Catholics, we're really fortunate because Holy Mother Church has given us so many supports to help us in our goal of heaven. We have sacraments, we have traditions, we have feast days, we have disciplines, we have community, and we should use all of those. Pray for your spouse every day. Pray for their needs and intentions. Pray that you can love them well in the way that he or she needs you to love them. Pray that he or she can love you in the way that you need to be loved. And remember that ours is a sacramental marriage, and beg God daily for the grace of marriage and fidelity to our vows. Be very specific about that. Start and end each day with prayers and affirmations of gratitude. You pick your prayers, and they can be as simple as thank you, but say them. So I recommend teaching your kids the daily offering, the guardian angel prayer, and the prayer of St. Michael. We want our kids to know that the devil is real, that there is a spiritual battle going on, and that we have powerful supernatural aids in that battle. For us, this means in the morning, we do our prayers in the car because they're all strapped in and they can't get away. So they just got to follow along. And at night we do 1 decade of the rosary, and each person has to say 3 things that they're grateful for. Now, to be clear, this is not always or even often a serene and idyllic experience. There is usually a child crying. Sometimes there's an adult crying. There are often at night times little boys running around, doing somersaults on the couch or chasing each other for a toy. I have been known to hiss Hail Marys at my children with a "you better stop that right now" glare. But never let the ideal become the enemy of the good, because there is so much grace even in the chaos, just in the act of doing it and offering that to God, that chaos. God wants to pour his grace into our families, but we have to keep inviting him to do it. So do it even when it's ugly. And it's important for our kids to see us do it and see us doing it imperfectly. Say things out loud that you want your kids to hear. Say things like, our goal is heaven. Don't get distracted by the sparkly things of this world. You're saying it for them, but you're also saying it for you. Tell them that our whole life should be a prayer. So I'm offering this workout for X, Y, or Z intention. Tell them God loves you so much and he seeks an intimate union with you. Let your kids know what you're praying for. You don't have to let them know everything that you're praying for, but let them know what you're praying for, who you're praying for, and why you're praying for them. That you're begging God to help get them to heaven. We have a list of prayers in the morning that we do with specific intentions. So my kids know we're praying for certain people who have mental health problems. We're praying for people that are looking for jobs. We're praying for people that are sick. We're praying for moms who are scared about their pregnancy. We want them to know that there's nothing beneath the concern of our Lord, that we can bring everything to him and he wants us to. Don't assume that your kids are going to get it just because we're doing it. We are rational creatures, but we need to shape our rational faculty, and we do that through speech. So say out loud the things that you want your kids and your spouse to know. Make Mass a priority. When you're planning your activities and schedules, make sure that attending Mass is the first thing on the calendar. If you're going out of town for the weekend, make sure that they know that you are figuring out where you're going to go to Mass and that it is on the agenda, that it is not an option. It has to be a priority. Confession. Let your kids see you do it. Put it on the calendar so you don't forget, and so that your kids know that it is a priority because you put it on the calendar. Take them with you to confession even before they're confessors, and get it. I know that is a mess, right? It is a hot mess to be in line in the confessional and you've got 5 or 6 kids running around. Do it anyway. If the people are, around you are annoyed by you, they can take it up with Father when they get in the box. It's not your problem, right? But your problem is you're wanting your kids to see that this is what we do. And we want them to know that it's not scary. Take them out for a treat after confession, whether they've gone or not, because we want them to know that good things come from doing the right things, so they get a reward. Sometimes in this lifetime, sometimes not, but we're going to make sure they get one in this lifetime. So we want them to know that this is the sacrament of mercy and that God is eager for us to come to him in this sacrament so that he can pour out his mercy on us. It's not something to be feared. And for some of you, you might be thinking, Chastic, I don't even like going to confession. I haven't been in a long time. So I'm talking to you right now. Confession is the sacrament of mercy. And I heard this saying once, and it really struck me. The devil knows your name, but he calls you by your sins. Jesus knows your sins, and he calls you by your name. So even if it's been a long time, go. Do it scared, just do it. Tell your priest it's been a long time. We're really lucky we have great priests who are kind, and they want us to receive that sacrament. So they'll help you make a good confession, and you will appreciate it. Even if you're scared, do it anyway. Corporal works of mercy. There's a reason that we are commanded to do them. They teach us that love has to be active. We have to do material things for other people. They teach us that love has to be active. So you have to figure out what your love language is, and then you have to act. And you have to put these acts on your calendar too, so you don't forget to do them. So we're heading into Advent. What corporal work of mercy are you going to do with your kids or your family? Again, you have to figure out what your love language is. I know mine, so I'll tell you some of the things that we do, but God has given you certain talents to put into use, so you have to figure that out because he has a mission for you based on your talents. My kids are young, and I want them to recognize Christ in the homeless person on the corner. So we make blessings bags so that my kids can hand them out. One, it gives them something to do to be a part of the process of serving other people, but it also helps them to seek Christ in that person on the corner, right? And not just to see the messy homeless person, but to see Christ in them. We want our kids to experience Christ in the poor and the suffering. We want them to see the humanity in the poor so that they won't lose sight of it. And we see that we are personally, individually responsible to love those who are in need. Even if this is not the most cost-effective thing, like I could make my money go farther giving it to some organization, but then my kids wouldn't know that they have an individual responsibility to pick up that mantle and serve the poor and the suffering. Live sacrifices. Make sure that you're talking to your kids about why you do it, whether it's the abstaining from meat on Fridays as part of a sacrifice. If you're not doing that you found something else to do as a family. No meat on Fridays during Lent, fasting during Lent, abstaining. And if you're not doing that, throughout the year you should be fasting in some way, whether it's from the internet or shopping or whatever. Pick something, but fast and talk to your kids about why you do it. Not in a, I'm so holy, I'm fasting because I'm so holy, but this is how we show God that we love him, right? We do these sacrifices. I'm almost done, honey. And this one's my favorite. Celebrate feast days. This is really important. I thought I turned off my alarms. Oops. So this one's really important, but it's also fun. Take the calendar from the church in January, mark the big feast days and holy days of obligation, and celebrate them. Observe days of penance and fasting, and then celebrate on the feast days. Give your kids, if you haven't already named them, give your kids good, strong Catholic names. If you have already named them and they're not good, strong Catholic names, find a saint for them and celebrate the saints' feast days. We want our kids to know that they have friends in heaven. And so put the feast days on the calendar, celebrate them, and invite others to join, maybe not this year, but invite others to join you in the celebrations. Share your celebrations on Facebook so people know that you're doing it, so that non-Catholics know that you're celebrating. Be okay with having people over to celebrate even when your house is not perfect. No one's house is perfect. People may notice the dust bunnies under the buffet. They may even find the toys or the silverware that the kids were supposed to put away but actually stuffed down into the cushions. They may find those things. They may also notice that the toilet was imperfectly cleaned by your children. If it really bothers them, give them a toilet brush and let them clean the toilet. It's okay. Because the other thing that people will for sure notice is that they were loved by you and they were invited in to celebrate with you. They'll experience the love of Christ in your imperfect home, and it will transform them in ways that we may never know. And these celebrations will impart on your family a powerful sense of the beauty and joy of living a Catholic life. Now my husband can speak. He'll give you a much more theological conversation.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for coming. I'm Dr. James Chastic. I'm a philosopher and a theologian. I teach philosophy and theology to kids all day. I'm not used to them being quiet, though, so this seems like you're preparing an ambush. This is difficult. I can adjust. Don't worry. I'll deal with it. But I'm not trying to say anything original tonight, so it would do me great joy if everyone came up to me and said, yeah, we already know all that stuff you've been talking about. We've been doing it for years. I'm probably the last guy to figure this out. I figured most of it out from just watching Jesse and watching other people do it. But let me just confirm you in the fact that it works. If it's working for you, it's working for me too. So we can all sort of nod together and accept the fact that the things, hopefully the practice I'm talking about, are the sort of things that are worth knowing about simply because they work. My big general principle in trying to be intentional about raising a Catholic family is that you can't give what you don't have. If you want your kids to be virtuous, you got to be virtuous. If you want your kids to be patient, you actually have to be patient, right? You can't give them something you don't have. You can't ask them to do something that you yourself aren't doing. kids aren't very good at following instructions, but they're really good at mimicking behavior. So if you model various practices for them, then they might have a chance of becoming that way. It's certainly the case that most of the times when I'm frustrated with my kids, it's because I'm expecting them to do things that I myself don't really want to do myself. And so it's, on the one hand, perfectly intelligible that they're acting the way they're acting. They have this infuriating habit of being so human, and that can drive one crazy. I mean, certainly one of the things I'd want to address, something that I've had some success in dealing with over the years, is just dealing with the anger that arises from kids. They can be, I'm not telling you anything surprising here, they can be surprisingly irrational. And by surprisingly, I mean they tend to surprise you with irrationality, which is what makes it difficult to deal with, right? You'll just turn the corner and they'll be painting in ketchup on the cupboards, right? Or they'll refuse to eat a hot dog because they didn't put the ketchup on. Like what? That does, which makes, why is that? Never mind, right? So again, there's a continual, right? So you're frequently taken off guard. You weren't ready for that. And when you're taken off guard, you tend to fall back on all your bad habits, and that tends to bring out a certain degree of anger or rage. And this can be very, very humbling, right? I've thought many times, how in the world can anyone be holy without kids? You just sit there and think you're perfect all day until the kids show up and you realize that you're short-tempered and you're slightly irrational. You don't know how to deal with small children asking basic questions. You're really put all out of sorts by a 2-year-old person. And that's humbling, right? On the other hand, you got to do something about this. You can't just be humbled forever. You got to figure out some sort of response that's going to work. What works? Well, I've got about 5 things that seem to have worked for me. I hope they've worked for you too. Number 1, the pilot light of the spiritual life for me has always been praying the rosary. If I don't do that, and if I don't do that every day, the power's just off, right? The lights aren't working, nothing's going to happen. As long as I'm doing that every day, right, I know I at least got a chance. I've at least got something like a spiritual life. So the first thing I would do, and the first thing that I have been doing for several years, is pray a rosary, no matter what you're doing and no matter what you've done, right? Just do it anyway. It just, that's got to be the one non-negotiable. Something will happen. Right? Now, the rosary is a vocal prayer. It's a vocal prayer that you can attach meditation to, but it's very helpful if it develops into, number 2, some kind of meditation. Right? Meditation, there's 1,000 different ways to do it, and everyone mentions that as more or less the first thing about meditation. Think about God for some amount of time. Set a timer and try to talk to him. Figure out something that works for you. Right? It's difficult to advance in prayer simply by vocal prayer. At some point, it has to become nonverbal, more interior. Once that starts happening, there's an entire universe of growth that opens up before you. I could refer you to a lot of different books, like Lahodi's The Ways of Mental Prayer, or the Catechism of Mental Prayer, of course, a classic like Teresa of Avila's Way of Perfection that describes an entire universe of prayer that you can ascend to once you enter into a meditative prayer. But again, I don't want to go into the details. I just want to gesture in the direction of there's a lot to discover there in the world of meditation. It's not just closing your eyes and trying to think about God. There's definitely an advance in the spiritual life. And it's important to start that journey as soon as you can. Another important part of my spirituality has been meditating on hell, oddly enough. Obviously, we all grew up pretty much in the same era, and many of the homilies seemed well, there's a fair stress on divine love and divine friendship. These are all very, very good. But what are they saving you from? Right? What are you being delivered from? Christ is a Savior, but what's he saving you from? He's saving you from something that you have to at least acknowledge, that you have to meditate on. It's a pretty horrible thing that you're being saved from. And if for no other reason than to be thankful, right? On a more basic level, fear is a pretty good motivator. So it's always helpful to have that there, at least in the back pocket, right? Something that you can fall back on, something that you can be both grateful for being saved from, while at the same time recognizing the consequences of something that you could fall back into. Last, dealing with anger was very, very difficult for me. Dealing with the irrationality of small children was very difficult for me until I started to become very intentional about what I ate. That is, and it didn't really, I found, matter what exactly my plan was. All that mattered is that I had a plan. It didn't really matter if I said I was going to eat this or not eat that, or eat at this time or eat at a later time. What mattered is just the fact that I was scheduling it. It seemed to me one of the things that became more and more apparent for the longer I did this was that it's very difficult, it's probably impossible, to get any kind of control over your life before you have control over what you eat. That's an experience that I think has been seconded by a lot of the spiritual works I've studied. The first sin you really got to get a hold of are just the sins of gluttony, the sins of what goes in your mouth. And we've got a lot, there's a lot more I could say about this. And my wife, in fact, is a diet coach just by profession, and she could say a lot more intelligently than I have. I'm just sort of muddling around trying to do these things as I figure them out, but she's a lot more methodical about it. Talk to her afterwards if you have more questions. Last of all, I had a really difficult time having enough energy to get through the day unless I could find some amount of exercise I was willing to do. Again, the right amount of exercise is any amount you're willing to do. And I'm not excited about exercise. I am not a workout guy. I want to do it on machines. I don't like being in nature when I'm exercising. And I don't like being outside. Just put me on one of those machines and let me run like a gerbil with no one else around for as long as I can tolerate it. Again, and I want to do the same thing every day. I don't like getting creative with exercise. Let's just go down there and get it over with. So that's about as enthusiastic as I can be about this activity. I may not be firing you up to go out and get a gym membership for the gym you now I guess can't go to anymore. But I'm only saying this because it works. Right? Whatever you can do, if it's 20 minutes walking around outside while you're trying to say your rosary, it's going to work. These are, as I said, all that I've managed to come up with, but they've been very effective for me. I always feel like I don't have quite enough time. I always wished I had enough time. Wish I had more time to talk tonight. But I thank you for I thank you for listening to me so far, and at least giving me the opportunity to work through some of these ideas, even for myself. So thank you for coming tonight again.
We want to open the floor for questions. They want to really speak to you about what your interests are. So if you have any questions regarding the topic tonight, I encourage you to we can't collect them because of
Okay.
Yes.
that. So we're going to speak loud. So please.
Yes, ma'am.
And loud.
So the question is, how important is marriage to the design of the Catholic family? Do you want me to answer that, or you want to take that?
You go first.
Okay. I'd say it's central. I think, I think from a divine perspective, like God made this institution of a man and a woman, and the idea that it's lifelong and committed, and then that we have the sacramental side of it, that marriage can be hard. I mean, like ours is great. It's fantastic. It's super easy. We love it. But for many people, marriage is hard, and even if you have an ideal marriage, there will be episodes of marriage that are hard, and God knew that, and so he, gave us the sacramental side so that we could get the grace of the institution of marriage, and we need that. Like, he gave it to us because we need it, and so we have to remember to ask him again and again. It's sort of a renewable energy. It's a renewable grace. We can keep asking for it and keep getting it. So yeah, I'd say it's pretty central.
Yeah, it's there are hard times in marriage, but it's a lot harder to be single. It's much harder to be alone. It's much harder not to have someone there that you're allowed to love, right? Who you're allowed to think about someone else, right? You're allowed to you have someone to share things with, right? It's
the good things and the bad things.
Yeah, it just seems like I mean, when I hear a lot of people talk about their marriage, they're frequently foregrounding the difficulties, and it's not all wonderful. Well, I mean, that just seems you're describing life, right? Life isn't wonderful, and in a lot of ways, right? So being single, right? Being a poor grad student, for example, is not wonderful. There's lots of downsides there too. It just seems like, all things told, it just seems like it's the life that works. It's the best. It's the most effective relationship I think you can have if you just want to be happy, right? I don't know a better one.
Yeah.
Right, it seems to me.
And I think too, for kids, I think kids really, they benefit from, they deserve to have a mom and a dad, and I say this having grown up. My parents divorced when I was very young. I was a year and a half old when they split up, so I've experienced the growing up without both parents. And my mom was amazing. She did an amazing job raising us, but it was really hard. Like, she suffered a lot, and I think we need to recognize that yes, there are reasons why marriages dissolve, and they're legitimate, but it's hard. It's hard for kids, and we should never forget that it's hard for them, and they deserve the best we can give them. So, yes, ma'am. So the question is, how do you speak to people who think that single parenthood or other family arrangements are just as good? I think it depends a lot on the circumstance and what your goal is. I think that the most powerful witness that we can give is to have good families and to have strong marriages. And I think that the dissolution of family is the fault of people who dissolve families, and we need to own that and accept that. And so before we go pointing fingers at what other people are doing, let's make darn sure that our house is in order and we're living an authentic Catholic life and having an authentic family, and really focusing on loving our children well and loving our spouses well, and loving those other people well, even in their errors, because they have kids that need to be loved well, and we have to be the ones to do it. We don't have to compromise on what we think is the truth, but we also don't have to prove that we're right in an argument. We need to prove that we're right in our lives.
Right, and one of the things that usually helps in arguments like that is you got to divide what works for the most part, or what's going to work as a rule, and what's going to work in a particular case. just because you know that something's going to work as a general rule, or right, that doesn't mean you know it's going to work in a particular case, right? That particular cases are difficult to predict. Now, of course, if something is going to work as a general rule, you'd expect it to work better in the particular case, right? But it doesn't have to, right? And so I think that's something, I guess that's important just to sort of diffuse the bomb before it goes off, right? In other words, I'm not trying to make a claim about your life right now, right? I'm trying to make a sort of statistical claim about what human beings have found works best, all other things being equal, which of course, that's a ceteris paribus clause, right? All other things being equal, this will work better. And I think that helps to sort of at least clear the air, right? I don't, in other words, now this isn't a personal battle between how I'm living my life and how you're living your life. We're just trying to say, look, if we had to write a law, right, what if we, in an ideal world, what would we prefer, right? And I think you could get a lot of agreement from even people who prefer their single life, right? And I'm pretty sure that, your mom probably would have preferred the single life she had. I think she also would have agreed with the statement that, that marriage would be the ideal, right? So,
Yeah.
So you don't have to prefer the ideal in your particular case, right?
Right.
It seems to be, it's
Right.
really important. That's not going to work for everything, but I think that sort of ironic attitude isn't going to work for all the issues of marriage and family. So I think when we get to questions of, say, same-sex attraction or something, that kind of analysis might break down a little bit. There we're at the level of particular acts, and there that's a little bit different. But yeah, if we're just talking about marriage and single life, then I think that there we got statistical pictures that help things out.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. How has our school experience been
That's
in the
a
pandemic?
plant.
I would like to say it's been a mixed bag. We have kids in 2 separate schools. Our son is in a public charter school that was hybrid and is now full distance learning, which is terrible. He's a human who needs social interaction, and with specific needs that he really needs in-person interaction. We found this compelling argument to transfer our kids to Transfiguration Catholic School this year. It had been on my heart as something that I thought I wanted for our kids. And we weren't on the same page at first about whether or not we would take them out of their other school. And then Father made this really compelling argument that we will be open for in-person instruction 5 days a week. And so we decided to transfer. And so, the Holy Spirit works in many different ways, and the Lord's voice comes across in many different tones. Sometimes it is the tone of your pastor coming from the pulpit. But my girls are thrilled. They love it here, and it's been a really good academic and social and spiritual experience. I think, and this sort of goes back to the point of seeking joy, that for me, one of the most compelling things about Transfiguration Catholic School was the marketing campaign, that it would be a place of Christian discipleship, academic excellence, and great love. And I believe very strongly that in life, when life gets hard, when you go through hard things, you look back to those times and places where you felt love and you experienced joy. And if my kids experience that in their Catholic school, that will be a good thing for helping them to stay Catholic throughout life. And that is something that I think will be really important for them. So
I'm a teacher, so I work both sides of the bar here, right? So I'm a teacher and a dad with kids in school. So I've taught distance learning, and I've taught obviously in person for 20 years now. And I'm not convinced that distance learning is even better than doing nothing. So I'm not convinced of that. I'm not convinced of that. It seems to be, it might actually be worse than doing nothing. I'm open to that discussion, and that seems to be something I'm more sympathetic to. I'd prefer if they just, if they really feel called to cancel school, just cancel the school and don't put them on screens. All of the returns I was getting from students who were trying to learn off screens it was chaotic. It was a mess. And so I guess the question is, what's my experience in school in the present situation in which we find ourselves? And I would think, if you can't be in person, just don't do it. Is roughly my. Now, of course, I'm not the one setting policy. And again, what I think would work in a general case probably won't work for all individuals. And I know there is the occasional strange student that at least tells me he learns more in distance learning. But even that student is pretty rare. And it's been my experience. I think we would be, if we really feel we have to pause this thing, if that's really the case, then just pause it. Don't try to pretend that you're instructing people over screens.
Yeah. I think human beings are social creatures, we're relational creatures, and I don't think that you can really effectively recreate that community and that relationship through screens. At the end of last year, when we were all in the lockdown, and I came to the conclusion that if we were going to do another year of distance learning, we would probably just do a year of unlearning and just, take a gap year, because the stress of getting kids on Zoom at a certain, I had 4 kids. I have 4 school-age kids, and I was supposed to get them all on Zooms at different times. And if it's the end of the world, I do not want their last days to be concerned about worksheets and Zoom conferences. I want them to be loved and to be seeking out, how can I look out into my neighbors and show the love of Christ to my neighbors right now? If this is the end times, let's get everybody ready, right? I'm not going to do worksheets anymore. But I'm really glad to be here at Transfiguration and not having to do unschooling either. So.
Yes. That's great.
So, any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Child of the 80s, for sure.
Yes. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. The biggest shock that I had, at least transitioning from being a kid to being a parent, is the fact that children don't leave the house anymore. So when we lived on a street which wasn't particularly busy or didn't have a lot of cars going down, and our kids were the only ones in the front yard. All the other house children were just kept in the basement, I guess, right? And they would play video games and so forth. We were lucky enough. Our blessing was to find a house on a cul-de-sac
And so there the kids could run around. The cul-de-sac children are allowed to leave. It's some sort of cult agreement that the city has or something. I don't know. So, but yes, is right. They don't leave the house. They're not allowed to leave the house. And what's really quite stunning is they prefer not to leave the house. They're screened out, and that's horrible. I mean, the absolute iron law that I made when we got married is I'll never have a video game machine in the house. So that was I just told her that even before we had kids.
How uncool is that?
And so Ani Twee tried to. I give him one year, I think, or there was some sort of screen, and
Yes,
I've crushed it. No,
Yeah.
so it's not going to work. It's especially for little boys. It's particularly.
Yeah.
I've got, but.
Well, and I think this goes back to, thank you for bringing this back to my first point, which is you just have to be really intentional. You have to make some decisions ahead of time, and so we just, our kids don't have cell phones. My 14-year-old does not have a cell phone. They're not allowed to have computers in the room generally. My son has it now for distance learning.
Which is another reason why.
Which is another reason why we don't like distance
So,
learning.
yeah.
But there's a family computer, because we take it very, we do have a real responsibility to guard our kids' senses, and there's just a lot of garbage out there. I mean, my poor daughter, she desperately wants to be able to do sleepovers. She's 12, she's never done a sleepover, and I have just explained, one easy out is that we have 2 kids with diabetes, and so they will never get to do sleepovers, because really, who wants to have the kid that might die at a sleepover? Nobody. But the other thing that I've had to talk to my daughter about, who now she's old enough to sort of understand some of this, the reason you're not getting a phone, the reason you can't do sleepovers, is because every house in America that's hooked up to the internet, and every kid that has a streaming device has access to porn. And you can't unsee that stuff. And there are lots of really good families that are struggling with this. And so, we're going to be uncool, but on the other hand, we party a lot. We are the people that bring people in and have celebrations and have parties. So they're not missing out that much, right? We're making up for it in other ways, and we don't bend on that at all. Sorry, you don't get your own iPad, you don't get your own phone. You're just not going to. It's just deal with it. How old do I have to be? A lot older. You got to be a lot older. Can I save up money and buy my own? Nope. If it's my own money, nope. Sorry, it's my house, so you can't use my Wi-Fi, so, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, uncool might not be the best word. I mean, the ability to relate to other people and actually talk to them and look them in the face is pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
But when all you can do is sort of thumb type and swipe through screens, that's not a promising. Just even on the sheer level of mating survival strategy, right? I mean, if you can't, look at people in the face and talk to them and interact with them using speech, right? Your chances of finding a mate in the wild are not really good, right? And so it seems like I'm helping you out here, kid. So for example, at the school I teach, we don't allow any screens at all, period. So. And it was always a question that got asked during open houses, what role does technology play in your school? And none. And our response was actually, our gift to your child is 8 hours of screen-free existence. So our gift to your child is that, right? So now they can if they want to meet girls, they have to talk to them, right? And if they want to interact with other persons, they have to say words, right? And what we find is that they thank us for it, right? It's a crutch. It's a crutch. I mean, who doesn't want to avoid embarrassment, shame, awkward moments, be able to just swipe through people who don't like you? I mean,
But and also
life ain't like that. So.
My 12-year-old did thank me this week because one of her friends experienced a mild case of some cyberbullying, and she's like, "Mom, it was bad." And I mean, this is mild. Let's just this is G-rated cyberbullying, but still. And I was like, "Now, aren't you glad you don't have to deal with that?" She's like, "I am glad, Mom. I don't have to deal with the texts and the emails." And so, they complain, but whatever. Yeah. Our goal is heaven. Yeah, like our goal is heaven, and I think if I can leave you with anything, it's just our goal is heaven.
Well,
We got to
Mary-
keep
yeah,
our
yeah.
eyes on that, and there's going to be a lot of things that can distract us from that. So let's just eliminate what we can that can distract us from that. And having a cell phone is not essential to getting into heaven, and it might be a deterrence. So
And don't forget, Mary did leave Jesus in Jerusalem for 3 days.
it's true.
So
It's true.
if this proves anything, it's that she certainly wasn't a helicopter parent, right? I mean, well, I'm sure he's in the train somewhere. It's fine. You know, it's great. You know, he'll be fine. Where is he?
Fine.
Right. So I mean, yes.
So
Yeah.
So if a person is floundering in how to live this intentional Catholic life, what is step one? Step one is do something, anything, right? So start with prayers in the morning. And I do actually, for me, I think something that was really transformative is the idea of gratitude in the morning and at night. So the first thing when I wake up, Lord, what's something that I'm grateful for? And the last thing before I go to bed, and I can, like, we have had some ugly days, right? Like, we've some days that you feel like there's not a lot to be grateful for. There is something to be grateful for, and it might just be that I have an electric bed warmer. That might be it, but that is something to be grateful for, just, so we're clear. But I think gratitude, really focusing on gratitude, just those simple acts of gratitude, there's science behind how it changes our brains, but I think doing that one thing, or like the rosary, what he says about the rosary, and if you're like, I cannot get through 5 decades of the rosary, that's cool. Just say one decade of the rosary, start small. But I think that in life in general, when we are floundering and when we are struggling, we get in our own heads, and it seems so much harder and so much scarier. That's why I say go to confession on the regulars, because when you're away from it for a long time, it is hard to go back. So just keep going. But we get in our own heads and we make it worse. And so just the act of doing something, taking a step, it's liberating and it's really empowering. So for me, I would say gratitude, doing the gratitude in the morning and at night, and a couple Hail Marys. I just think that's a good place to start. And the other thing, by the way, like, I did not grow up with a charismatic renewal around me, and I thought they were sort of weird for a long time. But some of my best friends are part of the charismatic renewal, and one of the things that one of my friends gave me, one of the greatest gifts, was don't let them own the Holy Spirit. He belongs to all of us, so call on him frequently. And that has been a really great gift. Like in the middle of the day, just saying, come, Holy Spirit, just at random times. And this is where technology is our friend. Set alarms on your phone. I have alarms throughout the day. It drives me really crazy because they go off all the damn time, like
sure,
then,
yes.
right? But set an alarm at noontime to say the Angelus, or at 3 p.m. to say, Jesus, I trust in you. And it seems really stupid, and it seems like, is that sincere? Is that authentic? It will become authentic, and it will become sincere, but you got to just do it. So use technology, in that sense, use technology to your advantage, I would say.
Yeah. Any kind of, if the reason why you can't get it, if the reason why you can't get started is some sort of absence of energy or some sort of depression-like thing, right? If that's what we're talking about here, and I know I've struggled with that for a long time, and it's really horrible, right? Knowing the good things that you need to do, but just being unable to do them, right? Not even be able to get out of bed. There's a part of your soul that's called the irascible part, and it just sort of deals with difficult goods, right? It's the most significant part of it is anger. That part of you, when you're depressed or when you can't get started, that part of you kind of goes numb, right? So it kind of goes numb. So how do you wake it up, right? One, just do any kind of self-denial that you can. It's training that muscle to work a little bit better. whatever you're willing to do is the right amount, just as long as you're willing to do it. And it seems like that's been pretty successful for me. I don't know. You can try that. And that's after I tried a lot of different things. I mean, I just thought, and so there's infinite ways to deny yourself, but you can schedule them, you can do some small thing, do some big things, whatever it is, and that's the most effective way I find to sort of get the energy for when you know you have to do something, but you just don't have the resources within you to find them. I think that's the effective practice.
Is that helpful? Okay. All right. Great. Anything else? Yes, ma'am. Last question. Sure. So if you're both working, how do you navigate careers and families? And if one of you is at home, what are the benefits of that? So we're both PhDs, but my PhD is in politics, and it turns out that people like me a lot more when I'm cooking and entertaining than when I'm talking politics. So I have a pampered chef business that lets me stay home with my kids. But we also, and PhD is more flexible than lots of other things, but we had decided early on that one of us would stay home, I would stay home. I have the right temperament for it. And let's be honest, right? You need to figure out which one is the right one to stay home if somebody's staying home. So I stay home, but I have a pampered chef business, and I have health coaching, wellness coaching that I do that I fit around the managing the household. And, he goes to work, and
I got a lot of jobs now. I think I work a lot.
He does a lot of teaching now.
So I do a lot. And that's, I think we're just at the stage in our life where that's, right, I just need to do a lot more work. I mean, I'm trying to put 5 kids through Costco. And so,
6 kids.
Yeah, 6 kids
Don't forget the 6th one.
Right, I know. So I'm trying to.
He sometimes forgets.
How does this work? Yeah, so.
I think it comes back. I think it comes back to having intentions, being intentions, and having objectives, and figuring out what's the right thing for your family. And 2 of our kids have diabetes, so it's important. It has been important for me to be home and be available for that. Our newest justice to the Supreme Court is evidence that you can have a career and reach the pinnacles of your career as a woman and still have 7 kids and a happy marriage. So there's not like one right answer to what the authentic Catholic family needs to look like in terms of work breakup. But for us, our family just works better if I'm home during the day and can manage the chaos and the monkeys, and then he goes to work and teaches and is the main breadwinner. So, but it really is a question of what works best. I'm not going to say there's one path. It depends on your kids. I had a lot of opinions about how I was going to raise my children, and then I met them.
But yeah.
And it turns out that they have their own wills and their own personalities and their own needs, and so we have to be a little bit flexible with that.
But even within our own peer group, there's a fantastic amount of diversity. So just the number of if we have people over, right, we'll have the girl being the
not right now. We're not having people over because we're practicing safe social distancing.
Right. That's on record now. So. But even within our own peer group of people who are very like-minded to us, there's a lot of career diversity. So a lot of good Holy Catholic people are, so for example, I won't go into too many details, I won't bore you.
Yeah, it really depends on the uniqueness of your family unit and your kids and their needs and your spouse and their needs. So there are lots of benefits to very different family and work structures. So
yeah, and to lay down any laws about employment during COVID too is probably its own, it requires its own casuistry and
yeah. All right, so well, thank you. Thanks for listening to us. Thanks for having us.